Welcome to Gay Men Going Deeper, a podcast by the Gay Men's Brotherhood that showcases raw and real conversations about personal development, mental health, and sexuality from an unapologetically gay perspective. I'm your host, Matt Lancidel, and joining me today is Michael Diorio and Reno Johnston. Welcome, guys. Today we're talking about feeling like we don't belong in the gay community. And we're going to be exploring questions like what makes you feel like you don't belong in the gay community? What makes you feel like you do belong in the gay community? And what have you done that has helped you feel like you belong? What we want you, the audience, to get out of today's episode is to know that you are not alone if you feel like you don't belong. Most of us have some form of maybe injury around belonging, attaching, relationships, these sorts of things. So it's very common. Belonging is a complex need. Many of us have attachment injuries that impact how we get this need for belonging met. So you're not alone. And if you are new here, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, please subscribe and leave us a review, which helps us get into the ears of people who need us. All right. So as I said off the top, belonging is a need. It is a very important need that we have as human beings. We are biologically hardwired for attachment, for connection, and we all have this need for attachment. How we relate to this need is going to be significantly impacted by our early developmental relationships. That could be with caregivers, it could be in our childhood with our peers, these sorts of things. So if we were bullied when we were younger, or we had attachment injuries with a caregiver, whether we were betrayed or abandoned or neglected, this is going to significantly impact how we relate to people in general. So we might have a belief that relationships aren't safe. That's going to impact how we move towards relationships. We might carry a strong fear of rejection. So it's like, geez, I'm going to reject before I get rejected, right? That's going to rupture our ability to be able to move into connection and have this need for belonging met. Love and connection is what we get when we feel like we belong. So this is why it is so important. This is why a lot of us move towards it. We want relationships. You see in the Gay Men's Brotherhood community, it's like so many posts, almost like 90% of them are about relationships, right? Because we all have this deep, deep conscious and subconscious need for love and connection. And when this need goes unmet, what a lot of people do is they develop like defense mechanisms or protector parts to not have to feel this need. So if, let's say, we have a strong fear of rejection, we're not willing to put ourselves out there to get our need for connection met, we might start to tell stories that I'm a lone wolf, right? I'm okay with spending my time alone, or I'm introverted, I don't need people, right? These are protector parts that we can build around not getting this need for belonging met. So while you're listening today, I want you to really think about, the parts of you that negotiate with this need if it's going unmet for you, and how you can maybe start to disarm these protector parts so you can start to meet this party that really desires love and connection, and allow that person, that part of you, to belong to the pack, right? And both are important. I think like the lone wolf is important. It's important to be able to run wild on your own away from the pack, but it's also really important to be able to come to the pack and get our needs met for that we can't meet for ourselves, right? Attachment needs we can't meet for ourselves. So I'm going to leave it there, and but I want to hear from you guys. I'm really curious about your take on this. So maybe we'll start with let's start with Michael.
Oh
um,
no.
what makes you feel like you don't belong in the gay community?
Um, Love it. This is I agree. It's definitely one of the hot topic that we see a lot in the Brotherhood in the Facebook group.
Mhm.
When I asked this question, first of all, thank you for the intro.
Yeah.
When I was reflecting on this question not too long ago, all of my answers were very judgy. So I think to summarize, what makes me feel like I don't belong in the community is when I judge it. Okay.
Mhm.
Not to say that that's necessarily wrong or untrue, but when I go into that space, it is very much a judgy space. But here are the ways. So I'm going to answer it this way because I want to take ownership of it. Here are the ways I judge the gay community in a way that makes me feel like I don't belong. I think that's the way I want to frame it
Yeah,
for myself, just because it feels like I'm in the driver's seat
I like that. Yeah.
yeah. So this is the way I judge the gay community, which contributes to the feeling that I don't belong. Okay. So for me, the number one thing, I have a lot. I can answer this in a lot of ways, but I'm just going to pick one that is the most for me, and that's the superficiality aspect, and that can be a lot of things. Um, like the way that I see a lot of gay men, and this is probably indicative of maybe where I live, but the way that I see them interact with the world, with other people, uh, it gets me a little bit angry sometimes. The ways I see them focus on appearances over literally everything else, authenticity, connection, their own mental health. Like this is very common that I see. Like they will do anything for a like on Instagram at the expense of their physical health, their mental health, connections, and deep relationships. And it makes me very angry. And I look around and I'm like, these are definitely not my people. Like I just feel like just this is not. I don't want to be part of this. If this is what the gay culture and the gay community is, take me out of it.
Yeah.
Right. And there are a lot of people out there, and I don't think that it's the people, I'm going to make a generalization. I don't think it's the people that are listening to this podcast necessarily, although there might be some of you, but there's a very deep um, desire to want to look good at the expense of literally everything else. I get we all want to look good. Fine. Who doesn't? But there's a balance that comes to that. There's a way to do it from a place of self-love, from a place of, you can self-validate in addition to get that external validation. We talk about that a lot. So I think that's the one I see. And also, when I see so many gay guys again spend money, thousands of dollars on an outfit, and yet like $0 on therapy or a book
Mhm.
or coaching or anything, really, literally anything that is actually good for their mind or soul. Very heavy emphasis on the body, not the inside of the body, the outside of the body. And very little goes into this, like your brain, your mindset, your soul, your spirituality, even the core relationships you have. And then they complain. And that's what makes me angry, not just about the gay community, but when people complain about problems that are extremely solvable, I get very angry. It's like, this is not rocket science. We know how to fix this. Tons of books have been written, tons of research out there on how to feel better. And yet it's there and people don't take it. Again, because they're too focused on the filter on whatever Instagram posts are doing. So, I see a lot of people out there that are very afraid. And I mean, I know that we see a lot of guys out there who are very afraid, very insecure, lacking
Yeah.
connections, carrying all their past trauma, past baggage, not healing, not doing the work. And that's the part that really makes me feel like I don't belong, is like, that's just not me. It's just not the kind of people that I want to be with. And unfortunately, I think where I live, at least what I'm exposed to, there is a lot of that, and I get exposed to it. Like I hear it in the streets, I hear it at the gym, I just hear it. It's in my vicinity, not people that I necessarily know or am in contact with by choice. But it's out there, and I feel like this is not the scene that I want to be in. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. And then spoiler alert, when I get out of that judgment mode, which was, I know that was a very judgy little spiel I had. True as it may be, still very judgy. When I get out of that mode, it's kind of the answer to my next question, which I can hold off on that for the next one.
Mm. So succinct. I love that. And I could second everything you said.
Yeah, I figured you might.
Yeah. How did that impact you, Reno, just listening to Michael? I'm curious.
I love that you asked the question, how did it impact me? Because what I noticed is, as I was hearing your judgments, I was experiencing an increasing distance between you and I,
Mm.
which is interesting because I actually, a lot of the things you describe being in judgment of, I don't actually relate to. I'm more like in your sort of arena, if you will, which is why the three of us are here, obviously. But that was interesting to take note of. And what came up for me as you were ending was this recognition that for a long time I wanted to belong, like nearly anywhere that would have me. If we go back to my early years, I just wanted to belong. you know, and it almost didn't matter, to the point where, you know, I was reaching for and performing for people who didn't even respect me and weren't even kind to me. I can remember a bully in school. Um, you know, I would give him extra Valentine's Day treats and stuff like that, you know, when you bring stuff to school, just so he would like me and like not pick on me, you know. And so I saw that behavior kind of continue as the years went on. And I noticed like, yeah, I just wanted to fit in. I just really wanted to belong. And then funny enough, at some point, um, probably around the time I came out, I just stopped giving a shit for the most part. You know, like it's not that I didn't want to be a part of some of these spaces because they looked really cool and sexy. Like everyone was like well dressed and stylish, and you know, there were the cliques. And I'm not gonna say that wasn't alluring in some way, but what started to happen is I just saw like this sort of emptiness of that, and that when I boiled it down, I was like, is this actually like, do I actually want to be a part of this, you know? And luckily, I got to spend a little bit of time in some of those spaces as time went on. It was like, you know, I entered the gay community and I started connecting and meeting new people and finding myself at different parties and in different nightclubs and things like that. But what I started to notice is that as I sat around for a while and just paid attention to what was going on, I was like, this doesn't actually resonate with me. And so, no, I don't belong here, but I'm not a victim. You know, I'm choosing to not belong here because I don't want to, you
Mm.
know, and my circle continued to diversify. So, you know, yes, like I identified as gay, I identify as gay, queer as well. And you know, I found myself in gay spaces and queer spaces and gay relationships and queer relationships, but I was no longer limited to that, you know. It was just one part of the fullness of my life and being and expression and world. Um, and so, you know, cut to today, yeah, I don't find myself chasing belonging in the gay community. Um, I just move in the direction of the people and places that resonate with me and away from the ones that don't. And luckily, I found the Gay Men's Brotherhood and you guys, and you know, it's like here we are, yay, you know, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. What about you, Matt?
Well, I'm just curious. I have a quick question for
Yeah,
you.
sure.
What's a judgment you have
Oh yeah.
of the community currently that prevents you from belonging?
Definitely. Um, yeah, that I'm gonna sound like such a bitch, but
I did it too. It's okay.
We all have these. That's
Yeah,
why
we
it's
all
I'm
have.
important to
Yeah.
normalize
I'm
it.
like, most of these people are not on my level internally. Like that's how I feel. I'm like, most of y'all are not on my level internally, you know?
I feel you, honey.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, like if we sit down and we kick it, like I don't know if y'all can keep up, you know?
Mm,
That's really how I feel. Now, what I want to say, and I'm glad you asked this question, is that it's been my experience that if we can meet at this level that I'm talking about or in this place that I'm talking about, and really that place is a lot less judgmental than I'm articulating it as, you know, I think it's Rumi says, um, out between, what does he say? Um, there's a field, I think in something about beyond right and wrong, there is a field, I will meet you there. I forget the
oh,
exact quote, but it's like a really well-known Rumi quote. And
mm,
my experience has been that I have been able to meet people who I previously judged in that space.
yeah,
And then it's like all that bullshit goes away. And
yeah.
we can really connect at the level that I'm talking about. It's just been my experience that there are many people who are not available or ready for that yet. And I've just had to accept that and kind of move solo sometimes. And then, like I said, when I'm lucky, I'll encounter these like seemingly rare specimen. And then we can go there, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks for both of you guys for your candor. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks for that question. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for me, what makes me feel like I don't belong in the gay community, I kind of did something similar that you did, Michael, but instead of the word judgment, I use stories. So the stories I tell myself about myself, the stories I tell myself about the gay community, the stories I tell myself about myself is they're all built around fear of rejection. So, what would I possibly be rejected for? Being weird, always been told I'm weird or I'm odd. I always get this feeling that people are kind of not sure how to relate with me when I go out to events or things like that. Like people will kind of be like, oh, like, it's almost like they feel intimidated or something and they don't want to. So then I feel awkward. And then probably my awkwardness or my anxiety, a bit of social anxiety can kind of come off as like, you know, the other story probably about myself is that I tell is that like people, or I guess this would be about the other. So the stories I tell myself about the gay community, similar to what you were saying, Michael, like I feel the superficiality and the hyper focus on sex. And it almost feels like in some circles in the gay world, like that's all they can talk about and think about. It's just like perseverating on sex and all the jokes are about sex and everything. So it's just this really hyper fixation on this one piece. And yeah, I have a story that similar to what you said, Reno, that they can't keep up with me. And I think, I look at these two things and I'm like, well, how do I protect myself from this? I don't want to just walk around with these open wounds of I don't belong and I'm hurting. So I build these protector parts around myself. And one of them is I'm more evolved than these people, right? So it's like I'll turn my nose up and oh, they're over there and I'm over here. So I other myself. It's very egoic, right? But it's a protector part. It's how I keep myself safe from feeling rejected by the larger group. And when I think about the gay community, I even think like that. Like I think like I'm over here and usually solo and everyone else is over there. And like they're having fun and they're living this like party life and whatever. And I'm over here, Mr. Serious, trying to pull people from that group over into like the more conscious pool. And I still think like that even right now. I'm like, yeah, that feels very true for me. And I remember when I was interviewing Dr. Court on the episode we did about sex and porn addiction. It was like very early. It was like 3 years ago. And at the end of the episode, he said, I've given up on the gay community. He said, I've just given up trying to help them because they're such a lost group of people. And like something in me, my heart totally sank when he said that. And I was like, I've heard that from multiple people who are in that generation and they feel like it's just hopeless. Like we've tried, we've provided resources, consciousness, therapy, and nothing seems to work. They want to continue to do party and play, have, lots of sex, not go to therapy. And I thought to myself, like, am I young and naive in this space? And like, am I on this path trying to, you know, pull people over from that pool into this pool where they can be more conscious and more loving and more accepting of each other and not just be so hyper fixated on body and these more superficial pieces. um, and then I always get humbled which is cool. Like, I get to meet people like you, or I go on a date with somebody and I'm like thinking that they're just going to be like not able to keep up with me, and they are able to keep up with me, but in their own way. They're in their own lane, right? Um, so I've had to lower my expectations and detach my expectation to outcome and look at like, okay, how can this person hold their own in their own lane? It might not be the exact way that they're going to show up for me, or the way I show up, but we all have our things that we're bringing to the table, our strengths, and so it's like, yeah, it's interesting. So I guess I look at a protector part, but I also look at a humbling part, and it would be humility, right? Humility's brought me into connection. which I think will be, we're kind of bleeding now into the second question, but before we hop into there, I want to, we're kind of getting the juices flowing here, and I want to engage the audience. I want you to maybe pause the video and reflect on the question, like what makes you feel like you don't belong in the community, or what judgments do you hold about the gay community? What stories are you telling about the gay community? And just reflect, and then come back and join us. And you can also join us and get part of the conversation in our sharing circles and our connection circles. So these happen, our sharing circles happen on the last Thursday of every month. Large group, one person sharing at a time, other people holding space and listening. If that sounds too intimidating for you, you can come and join one of our more intimate gatherings, which is our connection circles. And these happen on the second Thursday of every month. They're smaller, more intimate breakout rooms where you can discuss the topics on the podcast that we're talking about. So this month will be gay problems. We're going to be unpacking all the episodes that we talked about in that connection circle. So come join us. If you want more information on that, go to gaymensbrotherhood.com and check out our event section to RSVP. And if you don't have Facebook, you can get on our email list and we'll email you the Zoom links for the sharing circles as well. All right, let's hop into the second question. So, Michael, what makes you feel like you do belong in the gay community?
Yeah. The cat's out of the bag. The opposite of judging is when I look for what we have in common and it's there, right? So either one, I like I say that both are true, right? We're alike in many ways and we're not alike in many ways. It's where you choose to focus. It's going to give you that feeling. So when I choose to focus instead on the ways that we are in common or my people, like if the gay community is this big soup of people, where are mine? Where are the ones that I do feel like I belong with? Giving yourself permission, or giving myself permission that I don't have to live up to anything that I don't like out there. I don't have to like it, and then I don't have to participate in it. I can just let them do them and not judge it. Just let them be, let them have their way, and try not to judge it too much. And that gives me a lot of relief. And then I just focus on the people that I do feel like that sense of belonging with, that people that do nurture me, mind, body, and soul, people that can go deeper, people that can play in the shallow end with me and in the deep end with me, right? I like that mixture of both personally. So yeah, when I focus on what we have in common, and just kind of change the channel on everything else, which I tell people about that with us as well. Like if you don't like what we're talking about here, change the channel. There's lots of other stuff out there. And then having conversations with people, I think always helps me. Matt, you had just said people can surprise you. And I think we've talked about that as well here is, for all my judgments, I've been wrong a lot of the time. I've been humbled many, many times. So having those conversations and really getting to know people and giving them a chance to show themselves to me, because the thing with judgment and stories is that they are just that, they're not facts necessarily. So giving myself a chance to be wrong and giving them a chance to show me who they really are has really helped me find that commonality, which does help me feel like I belong. And people who share that vision of what they want from their life, whether it's gay or not, whether they're gay or not, like just finding people who are similar to me, who have commonality with me, has helped me. Or I say this in my coaching all the time: open your heart, not just your hole, because we're really good at opening our holes. Okay. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit here.
I was like, who are you talking about?
Right. And then I learned how to do that first before I learned how to open my heart. And I think that's very true for a lot of people out there. Like we lead with the sex, and sex is great. There's nothing wrong with sex, all the good things about sex. But what else is there, right? So I think having vulnerability, emotional vulnerability for me was a harder thing to do than sex. It still is. Sex is for me not a problem. It doesn't. Yeah. But emotional vulnerability, opening my heart, I still feel scared. I think that's true for a lot of people. There's that fear of rejection that comes up, that abandonment, that judgment, fear of judgment, which we just proved that we do judge each other. So my short answer is, yeah, focusing on that which connects us more than which divides us. I'm going to take a little page out of Kamala Harris's book right there, because she's been saying that a lot lately.
You stimulated something in me, and maybe I want to share impact is, you said sex is easy but emotional vulnerability is more challenging. I agree with that in my 20s, but then what's happened is once I've become more heart open and I become more emotionally vulnerable, sex has changed for me. Sex has become more sacred. So I find it is actually not as easy for me to just open up and be sexual with somebody, right? Do you share that same experience, or for you, like, are they just kind of still quite separate?
Well, now I can do both easily.
Okay. Yeah.
I can still have my fun, but it does not take a lot for me to be vulnerable like it used to. Like I used to be really terrified of it. But I think the work we do, the work that I've done on myself over the last 10 years, same thing like in my 30s, really helped me create safety for myself with respect to vulnerability and learn to love myself and have that self-compassion. So even
Yeah.
if that I do take that emotional risk and the rejection does happen, which happens all the time, by the way, it's not gonna I'm gonna be in my own soft place to land. It's not gonna kill me. And you know, it's worth it, because most of the time when I do choose the vulnerable moment, telling someone how I feel, I say I love you first if I'm dating someone or really interested in someone. um, it usually goes well. Even
Yeah.
if it's not the result I wanted, it's not met with like, get away from me, you crazy person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Being let down with tact. I think we've talked about that on this episode or on this podcast before, is like how there's actually like really kind ways of
Yeah,
rejecting people. Yeah.
love it. Yeah, there's so many great posts out there that give you like scripting how to do it, because
Yeah.
yeah, I think we either ghost or we just say it in a rude way, but there's so many beautiful ways to say no thank you.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for sharing your experience. Reno, what
Mhm.
about you? What makes you feel like you do belong in the community?
Yeah. Hmm. It's interesting. One of the things that I wanted to mention is like this, as I was listening to you share, Michael, I was thinking of this distinction between like moving from judgment versus moving from resonance. And I noticed how those two things felt different in my body. Like, steering clear of something because I'm judging it versus steering clear or engaging with something because I'm judging versus because there's resonance or there isn't. And to know me is to know that I tend to move through the world, really paying attention to what I vibe with, what I resonate with, and what I don't. And yeah, sometimes there's sort of that judgment like intermixed in the the way that I navigate. But I definitely try to be aware of when that's happening, and to, as was mentioned previously, really allow my heart and my body to open in that situation and to create space for curiosity to kind
Mm,
of engulf the situation. It's like, okay, um, what's really going on here? And so rather than pull back, I'll sometimes lean in. And what starts to happen as I lean in and just hold in awareness the judgment and the sort of intellectualization of the experience I'm having, just hold it in awareness and embody this openness and receptivity and curiosity. Well, I would say curiosity first, and then sort of an openness, and then a receptivity, maybe in that order. That's how I experience it in my body. What ends up happening is that it's so funny. I'm noticing myself describe this whole process, and I'm just smiling because it's such a Reno way to like describe this process. But it's like my body and my being start to open, and as a result, there's kind of this like union with whatever's happening in front of me. And
mm,
so that is for me the process of coming into belonging with whatever's in front of me. In this case, the gay community, or a group of gays that I'm sitting across from, who I was maybe formally judging as being like vapid or, like not on my level, so to speak. It's like, okay, cool. Let that be there. You're feeling maybe defensive, maybe you're fearing rejection, maybe you know, there's a story there, something happened in the past, you're bringing it into the present. Okay. Notice that it's perfectly okay for you to want to protect yourself, you know, to be on guard. That's normal. And also, like, let's just hold that a little bit more lightly and create a little more space, you know. So I'd say that's been really helpful. And then, you know, as was mentioned here, I think looking for the things that we have in common and really prioritizing and focusing on those things. And I
Mm.
keep coming back to this situation recently where there was this woman who moved into our house, and I remember before she moved in, um I had my guard up in a way, and I wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure, you know, as it goes with new people. And I know actually, um I remember entering this group of gay men at one point when I was like 19, and there was one of them in particular who was really threatened by my presence. He was like the sort of queen bee of the group and was real bitchy and real quick. And I loved it. I loved it. And I remember I said to him at one point, I was like, I know that you don't really like me or you're like having trouble with this situation. I said, but I just need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I said, like, we have friends in common now and I'm here. So we're gonna have to figure this out. And I think he got it at that point. I think he was like, oh, okay, like a worthy opponent, you know. And I was like, yes. And then we became really close and we started finding things in common and having a good time, and he stopped judging me and I stopped judging him. And then I just started to appreciate him for his realness. He was candid and kind of bitchy, and I was okay with that. I was like, this is you, you know, you're, yeah. He very much reminded me of Bianca Del Rio from RuPaul's Drag Race. And I just love that about him, you know. And to this day I still hold him fondly in my heart. So yeah, I think there's something there about just making space for commonality, and and just naming it sometimes too. That has actually, I really want to say that that has there have been many situations where I thought I wasn't going to be friends with someone, and I've named it. I've said to them, you know, I got to be honest, like I wasn't really sure about you at first. I didn't think I was going to like you. I didn't think we were going to get along, and that just like opened things up. So
Mm.
yeah, I think that's a key piece as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. That's why I like authentic relating. You know, like you could have played out that dynamic with that guy in this like implicit dance, and it just becomes a tug of war. But then as soon as you make the implicit explicit, which is what authentic relating does, it's like, oh, okay, we can soften and we can actually move into the actuality of what's occurring here, right? Which is like maybe threat or you know, misunderstanding or something, and then you can develop rapport based
Hmm.
out of those, because it's probably a shared resonance or a shared wound or a shared fear or something, right? Which is why it's butting up against each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I see you. Like you're a bitch and so am I. Like let's just get it out of the way. Let's
Yeah.
name it so we can move on, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like alpha men, like, you know, you look at alpha men and what do they really crave? Like they crave power, right? So it's like when you have two alpha men coming into a situation and they both are competing for power. Not saying this in your situation, I'm
Yeah.
just speaking to alphas. It's just how it tends to operate.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Yeah. What makes me feel like I belong in the gay community? I kind of framed it in the same way as I did in the previous question. The stories I tell myself about myself and the stories I tell myself about the gay community. This is going to, right? The stories we tell are the reality we create for ourselves. So I'm learning to tell new stories. And if I can't tell new stories yet, I'm learning at least to be mindful of the stories I'm currently telling myself. So I don't let them play out over and over again and perpetuate unconscious disconnection. I think one of the biggest things is like, how am I like these people? Because there's a part of me, and I think this is where we have transference and countertransference within connection with each other, is it's like, oh, I see a guy when I was having issues with my own femininity, I would see someone that was really feminine. It would make me want to reject that right? So it's like, how am I like these people? How have we had a shared similar experience? And that's the beauty of the Gay Men's Brotherhood, is we all are coming in and talking about our shared experience, right? A lot of us struggle with relationships. We struggle with shame. We struggle with internalized homophobia. These things, like, those are common threads that we can all see within each other. And when it's conscious, it's actually a cord of connection. But when it's unconscious, it's like a disconnected cord. We can't actually meet each other. And I think that's like a big piece for me. So I've been learning to like look at how like look for similarities versus differences. My brain, because I've experienced a lot of trauma, a traumatized brain is really good and programmed at looking for differences, because it's all about safety and survival. So how is this person different from me? How may I possibly be rejected by them? So I've got to keep myself safe. So my protector part in that instance would be to reject before I get rejected. So if I start looking for similarities, I start looking for common ways that I can bond with them or connect a cord to them. And that's a big one. And then another piece is like, we're all suffering, like, and we're all doing our best to get through that. Like, life is fucking hard. Like, I know how hard life can be. I know the suffering that can be caused. And I know the amount of deep work I had to do to get to the point of where I'm at. And like, I can look at people, and instead of saying I'm more evolved than you, what if I could look at them with compassion and say, fuck, like, I feel for you because I've been there. Some days I can even still be there, right? And like, just offer love and compassion. And I think when I'm rooted in love and compassion, I'm feeling like I belong, right? Because I feel like when I'm in that place, like, I'm at my best. Like, I'm a very deeply compassionate person, and I have a lot of love to give. And I think when I'm coming from that place, and that the starting point for me is looking for similarity. How am I like these people? What sort of shared experience do we have that I can draw on and create connection with them? I think that's a big piece. And then because I carry stuff around feeling different and feeling like weird, and like I don't belong in the pack, I think when I can be myself, when people involve me and they like maybe can feel that I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and they're like, come over, like, let's, or they like, just like, so, when people do it for us, they help us. Like, I do this all the time with people. When I go out to things and I see someone that's uncomfortable, like, I'll go up to them and I'll create inclusion for them. And I think when someone does that for me, it's such a gift. And and then that allows me to feel like I can be myself, because I refuse to fit in. I refuse to be in that energy anymore. So, and that might be one of the reasons why I don't go to those things. But when I feel like I can just belong. And again, maybe I should have said this off the top, but Brene Brown describes belonging and fitting in as very different. Fitting in means we have to change something about ourselves. Belonging is that we get to just be who we are, right? And we fit in, or we belong because we are. We are just being ourselves, and we are a unique piece to the puzzle, right? Puzzles are kind of like belonging, right? And you're not going to fit them in. You can't fit a jigsaw puzzle into, a piece that doesn't fit. So I like that. And I like the analogy of just getting to be myself. So that's a big piece of belonging for me, is getting to just be who I am. Yeah.
Can I share something, Matt?
Yes, please.
One of the ways that I like to do that, to find that commonality, with somebody. So I know how I was judging before. Let's say I'm in a space and I'm judging someone as being superficial or whatever I just said. A really great way to, and my brain will argue with me on this, but it's really fun to do anyway, is to just look at it with complete curiosity instead of judgment, and is ask myself, what would compel someone to be like this?
Mm,
Like, why?
totally.
What happened? Like, what could have possibly happened in someone's childhood, someone's past relationships, that this is the way they are going about through life, that this is what they're prioritizing,
Mhm.
over something else, over their mental health. Like,
Yeah.
what compels people? I love asking that question, but that's also because I love getting in people's brains. And it's really, I just like getting really curious about what makes people tick. But when I look at it from that way, it's never like, the answer is never, oh, just because they're a dick. The answer is usually because maybe they're hurt, maybe they've gone through some kind of trauma. As queer people, we all have to deal with that minority stress and the wounds that come from growing up in the closet.
Totally.
That has a lot of impact that I think most people don't realize the impact that that still has, even though you're out and open and you're not really in the closet anymore. Those wounds still do pack quite a punch. And I think when I look at it from that way, there's more compassion, there's more empathy, and I get it. I'm like, okay, that's perhaps that's why. And then the judgment softens into just curiosity and compassion.
Hmm.
I love what you said about the judgment softening, Michael, because this is something I notice as well, is like there's this real longing for my edges to soften and like to be in space where that can happen, in relationship where that can happen. And there's also this judgment around others' edges. I see this in the gay community quite frequently as well. Like I was on the SkyTrain recently and there was this gentleman there, and I'm gonna assume that for all intents and purposes he was gay, right? And maybe that's like bothersome to make that assumption, but like I'm going to. And something I noticed about him was it just it felt like there was it felt like there was this kind of defensiveness from him. Like you may know what I'm talking about if you've ever gone out to the nightclub, or you're like, you're out like and there's a group of gays and they kind of got that like stance with the attitude, and they're just like whatever, that sort of thing. And I could feel it coming off of him. I was just like, fuck, I really wish that like that wasn't there and we could just like have a moment where we saw each other and smiled and like, because there's like we're both gay, doesn't mean we have to smile at each other, but there's this thing black guys do, black men in particular, we call it the nod of solidarity. And I
Mhm.
learned this when I was a kid, where like I would see my dad pass another brother and they would like nod at each other, right? And I was like, Dad, did you know that guy? And he's like, no, we're brothers. We acknowledge each other. And I was like, that's so dope. And I've just had this longing for that in the gay community where I'm like, WTF, like can we just like soften and let that in,
Mhm.
let each other in. I know it's easier said than done. And as was discussed here, it's like what would have a person, hold hard edges, right? I get it because I do it too sometimes. I walk through the world like you can't touch me and there's a chip on my shoulder. I
Mhm.
totally get it. I'm just curious, like, what would it look like for all of us to explore, allowing that to soften and maybe like acknowledging one another with a smile and some openness when we see each other, you
Mhm.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, sass is
Mm.
the protector part.
Yeah.
And it's the energy of I'll reject you before you reject me. So like I'll be mean and I'll be catty and sassy because then if you come at me, it's like I'm already, but it's all it's doing is creating disconnection before there's even opportunity for any connection to occur. So
Yeah.
it's important, I think, for us all to be aware of that. I love that. That's your
And I
wish.
know it well. I'm sassy, right? Like
Mm.
I could write the book, right?
Yeah,
So I'm calling myself out too.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 Let's take a moment, audience, you guys, and just take a moment and check in with how you're feeling. So we talked about question one, we talked about like disconnection, how we don't belong. But then we just spent the last 20 minutes talking about feeling like belonging and connection. How does that change how you feel? Just check in with yourself. And if you are looking to accelerate your personal development journey, you can check out our coaching collection. So we have, you can learn to heal and empower yourself at your own pace by getting instant access to 45 plus premium personal development coaching videos created by us, as well as our Healing Your Shame and Building Better Relationships courses. You can head to gaminggoingdeeper.com for more information there. And there's going to be a lot of stuff in the community pathway around belonging. And then our Building Better Relationships course is really going to help with maybe breaking down some of these protector parts so you can start to move towards more internal sense of safety and start creating belonging in your life. So, all right. Question 3, Michael, what have you done that has helped you feel like you belong?
Good question. I like that we're ending off on this way. Because the way that the question is asked, it what have you done? And I think that's where I want to kind of draw focus. As you guys probably know, I really
Yeah.
like to focus on the empowerment aspect of anything. I just kind of go through life with that. What can
Yeah.
I do? So belonging is a tricky one because is it something that you decide or is it something that other people have to do for you, right? And I think the answer is both. You can't have one though without the other. So before, when I felt like I didn't belong, or anytime I feel like I don't belong, and for a lot of people that a lot of clients that I have that struggle with this sense of I don't belong in the gay community, they're also the people who tend to abdicate responsibility for their own belonging. So what does that mean? What are the things you can do, right? We don't have control over whether people like us or not, right? We don't have control over whether people want to be with us or not, but we do have some things that we do have control over, right? We can go out into the world and engage. That will help versus staying at home, not engaging, sitting behind your wall, judging everybody else, but not going out into the world to do anything about it. We can create our own opportunities for connection with spaces that maybe we want to create, right? So like we did with the Brotherhood, there was a gap out there, let's create it, okay? There's actively participating in things that are out there. So if you're listening to this, we talked about our connection circles, our sharing circles. There are spaces out there, and this I will die on this hill. There is no shortage of spaces for gay queer people to connect, virtual, in person. You just got to go find them, okay? And I know for some people that's harder than others. I get it. If you're in a rural area or if you're in a country where maybe there's not so many, I get that it's difficult, but it is still possible. Another thing you can do, or that I can do, that that helped me feel more belonging, is learn how to be vulnerable, learn how to let down that guard, learn how to take down that sass every once in a while and have a deeper conversation, let somebody in, somebody that you trust, and really get to know people for beyond, the physical. So these are all things that have helped me immensely. Now, that's what you can do, or that's what I can do. But like we all know that there's a lot of research out there on what fosters a sense of belonging. Brené Brown is one of the first people that comes to mind when we talk about this. She will scream this from the rooftops and has been for years. Vulnerability, that helps. Not helps. That is at the core of that sense of belonging, right? So your job, our job, is to do this consistently and to do it well. These are skills that you have, and they're skills that we teach. And I know that it's scary because I went through it too, but that is what has helped me. And the belonging is there. I don't think it's fair to say that, the gay community is fundamentally broken. Sure, there are things that are not great. Absolutely. We all know that. But like, okay, let's start focusing on where it is going well. Where do we have that camaraderie? Where do we have solidarity? I love that word that you used, Reno. And it's there. It is there. Maybe it's not on, maybe it's not on Instagram all the time, but it's there. So that's what I can do. That's what I have done personally. But then we have to remember the hard part of the belonging is that it is an inherently relational experience. So I don't get to choose for sure where I belong and where I don't. It's a feeling, and it does come from the other. And this is the hard part, right? We can't force it, but we can try to create inclusion within ourselves. And I think, when we do that, it's easier to do that with others. So Matt, you had used the example of being in a bar. I mean, I wouldn't have done that in my 20s, but I absolutely do that now for the same reason that I've learned to do it for myself. And I want to be the change that I want to see in the community, right? Yeah, so we can do things for ourselves to create that belonging, and also we do have to rely on the other as well. But it's that balance of the self-initiative and being in spaces where you do feel seen, heard, and accepted, and then you, on the other hand, being the one who's also at the table, also create that sense of other people, talking to them, making sure they feel seen, heard, and accepted for who they are as well. Which, all this to say, quitting that judgment or watching that judgment show up and then making sure you're not leading with it. So that would be my short answer.
I love it. I could just say second that and just drop the mic.
Yeah, same. I was like, what have you left me to say? You've said it all. I think one thing I do want to say is, mine has been a journey of belonging to myself, so that I can belong everywhere and nowhere, and be at peace with both. And so I think what I would leave, is that growing to belong to myself, and reconciling those fragmented, rejected, disconnected parts of my own being, my own inner world, have allowed me to deepen into like self-belonging, which has allowed me to move through the world, um, belonging everywhere and nowhere, and also, most importantly, belonging to myself. And then in addition to that, being at peace with the fact that, well, like suddenly I'm valuing myself, right? Because I'm belonging to myself. And so I'm also discerning about where I actually want to belong and to whom and where I don't, as opposed to, moving through the world with this pick me energy, which no judgment, because I used to. And I love that little guy. His heart was so pure and just wanting to connect with everybody, and that I still have that capacity. I've just developed a degree of discernment, and again, I can't say this enough, like I belong to myself, and that has made all the difference. So
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beauty. Yeah, I can't, just from what you just said, I feel like this young part in me, I was very, very like vibrant as a kid and like performing and dancing and like all the things, you know what I mean? And I had so many friends, and it was the life of the party kind of energy. And that's like my Gemini side, very, very social. And then I think trauma like really just put all this stuff around my heart. And like I shelled up. And I think my trauma healing journey, what I'm going through the last, 3, 4 years, has really been about like melting that away and like rediscovering and refinding that part in me that's like joyful and happy and celebrates. Like I don't even really can remember the time I celebrate celebration. I want more celebration in my life, celebration of life, of joy, of connection, and these sorts of concepts. But yeah, so I would say, yeah, like one of the bigger ones for me would be therapy. It's been huge. EMDR is really good for helping like get to those lower like subconscious roots around like beliefs that we have about ourselves, not worthy of love and belonging. That's the little mantra of shame, right? Shame makes us feel like we're not worthy of love and belonging. Most of us, if you're listening to this, you probably have struggled with toxic shame in at some point in your life. So yeah, so getting for me, it was about getting really clear about my core wounds and the stories that I had attached to them. So I'm not worthy of love. I'm not enough. I'll be rejected. People aren't trustworthy. And then like how I apply those core wounds into the stories of my life and how I relate to people, right? The assumptions I place on people based off of my own wounding, right? So I've had to change out my filters, just like we have to change out the filters in our car because they get dirty. We got to change out our filters in ourselves and like constantly be working with them. And that's part of me, like that is like challenging my ego, challenging my stories. It's been huge. Like if you can't challenge your own ego, you're going to be stuck in unconsciousness. So you have to be able to challenge that narrator in your mind that's constantly on your side, right? It's like, no, you can't always be on my side. Like that's why like my best friend is a psychologist and she's so objective and she's not the kind of friend that'll always take my side. Like she challenges me and I'm like, damn it, in the moment it stings, but I'm like, this is why she's my best friend, because she holds me accountable and she doesn't cater to my ego. She wants to see my soul develop, right? And she's like a soul friend. So I really appreciate that. Um, yeah, and then creating new experiences and telling new stories. So that takes courage. I got to put myself out there, right? Which is hard. You got to push through some of the discomfort and then create new stories, which can then be your reference point for moving forward. And then not fitting in, like just not trying to fit in, stopping the fit in shit. Like I used to drink and party and go to these things, and I'm like, this isn't me. So I stopped doing that, and then I started finding people like you guys, and I started creating the community that wasn't there for me. Like I'm hiking on the weekends now, and I'm trying to create sober community in Calgary with gay men, and it's building. I'm starting to find this, which is fantastic. So if it's not there, build it, right? Don't wallow in your loneliness or aloneness. Like get out and create what it is that you long for. uh,
I have one more. Can I add one?
yeah.
Get off Grinder.
Get off. Yeah. Oh, So toxic.
If Grindr is your only way that you are trying to connect, and I'm using that
Yeah.
word very loosely for Grindr, with gay men, like you're gonna have a very skewed perception of
Yeah.
and you're gonna definitely feel like you don't belong.
Yeah. There's some people that are behaving like flowers on there, but a lot of people are behaving like weeds. I'm not going to call them weeds, but their behavior is weed-like. So you got to sort through a lot of weeds to get to the flowers. But yeah, it's not the most community-oriented app. We'll say that.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to both of you guys for sharing, like I said, so candidly and vulnerably. I love the raw and real stories that we share. It's awesome. And thank you to our listener viewer for tuning in to yet another episode of our podcast. And just remember that this podcast and YouTube channel are listener and viewer supported. If you enjoy what we're creating, you can support us by making a donation to the show using the link in the show notes. And you can also subscribe to the early access option on Apple Podcasts, where you can listen ad-free, gain early access to episodes. And all your support helps us to continue making content for you and supporting our community. So we do thank you in advance for that. And hopefully we'll see you at one of our next events. Get into the Brotherhood if you're not there yet. Go to gaymensbrotherhood.com and get connected to us. We want to see you at one of our events. All right. Much love, everybody.